Right, okay, here we go. We're back again with chapter 3. Mary Magdalene and Jesus, they go off on their travels together. And this is where it all starts. This is the beginning. So, here we go. There were several women who accompanied the Lord as we began to call Jesus on his mission to preach. And three of us who always walked beside him, Mary, his mother, and his sister Mary, and her sister Mary, and myself. The others called us the Three Marys, and me they called the Companion of the Saviour, in recognition of the special love that Jesus and I had for one another. It was a sweet title to my ears, very different to those I had previously borne, or had awarded myself: the slut, the bad sister, the exile, the profligate. We were embarked on a journey, on a long journey. Jesus wished to return to his own city of Nazareth in order to repeat his message to the people there, and also to those in the towns and villages on the way, to renew their faith and to deepen their commitment to his word. Our route to Galilee lay up through Samaria, and we were to cross the Kishon River and the plain of the Esdraelon. My heart beat fast at the thought of all these places I had not seen before. That night, sitting by the fire we had kindled on the roadside, I was too excited to eat, looking up at the rugged outline of the hillside above us, the moon floating in a flurry of silver cloud. I fancied I could see the huddle of houses that was formerly my home. Then I looked at the men and women whose journey I now shared, men and women who called themselves my brothers and sisters. They seemed unremarkable enough at first glance. 20 or so ordinary people like Martha and myself, until you caught the ardour in their eyes, which rested upon Jesus, who sat a little apart and conversed in low tones with John, until you contemplated the force of love and dissatisfaction that had dragged them unresisting from their homes and livelihoods, until you watched the freedom with which some of these men and women talked to each other, held hands, hugged and kissed, practicing an ethic of license very different from the reserved ways we were used to in Bethany. "Look at those two women," Martha whispered to me from her place by my side. They sprawled side by side, the one with her head in the other's lap, laughing. The fingers of the one teasingly traces the profile of the other. The firelight illuminated them where they rested opposite us, playing over their beauty and grace, and my heart warmed to them. John told me earlier," I whispered back. No, John told me earlier, I whispered back, "that certain of our new companions consider it no sin to enjoy licentiousness outside marriage. He said we must all choose between asceticism and concupiscence." I don't know all my words like that, about that. That either conserve the soul to make contact with God. I know what it means, but I just can't say it. To make contact with God, and that the one is no better or worse than the other. So you get that, don't you? It's talking about sex and the pleasures of sex and what you can achieve from sex. So anyway, carry on. Just thought I'd explain that because I can't actually pronounce the word or even spell it. So, "The men don't use prostitutes," Martha blurted out, "and the women need not be chastised." "John said there was no need," I replied, "for they all love each other. They can choose how to express it." My sister was silent for a moment. Then I felt her fingers touch me. When she spoke, her voice was full of joy. "Then you are free, Mary. of your old occupation. You are a free woman now, and with no need any longer to abase yourself before men. If these disciples, as you say, accord women dignity and respect, then I do not need to fear for you or for myself. She embraced me, and I laid my head on her shoulder, my heart swelling with tenderness for her that hitherto I had rarely expressed. We jumped up and moved apart when a male voice growled a greeting in our ears. It was Simon Peter, who had come up quietly and settled himself on the ground next to us before we saw him. "Daughters," he addressed us, and his face and voice were full of kindness. "Welcome to your new family. We are all so glad that you have chosen to share our life." He glanced at the two intertwined fingers on the other side of the fire, who were still, now, as though falling asleep. "But daughter," he said to Martha, "you are a woman of virtuous reputation, who is innocent of the world. Will you let me offer you some advice? Don't let the excited talk of some of these other young women, these other young people, turn you from the right path. Don't let these other young people turn you from the right path." Martha drew herself up as though offended. Her voice was gentle. Your concern for us is welcome, and I thank you for it. My sister and I must be grateful for the care of a friend." Peter looked at me for an instant before turning back to Martha. The concern in his face suddenly reminded me of my father, and I warmed to him a little and began to hope he had some liking for me. If he had, I thought, I would return it. "Mary, your sister," he said, "obviously repents of the life she has felt obliged to lead. That must be a cause of rejoicing for us. But let me assure you that the path to union with God is a narrow one. Love means self-denial, self-discipline, and chastity. There is no place amongst us true disciples for the practices of the heathens." He waved his hand at the two women on the other side of the fire. "Some of these disciples," he went on, "will tell you that to plunge into sensual delight provides a way of exploring matter rather than being obsessed by it, a way of finding the divine spark within. But that is dangerous, to my way of thinking. Once unbridled your lust, once open to that particular door, and who knows what demons will rush out and possess you." He wiped his face on his sleeve. I understood him then, and I pitied him. "Believe me," he said to us, his face shining with earnestness, "it is only by abjuring the pleasures of the flesh that the soul is liberated and can reach contemplation of the true world hidden from us." He paused to draw breath, and I seized my chance to speak. "But what of your wife?" I asked him. "What of her?" He looked a little surprised. "I have spoken of her to you before this, have I not? Surely you remember what I said when I told you how I could not allow her to expose herself to the dangers of travelling. She begged me to let her accompany me, but I felt I must leave her behind. In any case, there are the children to be thought of." There was pain in his face, and his voice was anguished. "Someone," he cried, "had to stay behind to care for the children. My youngest son is only 3 years old. He was a handsome man, Simon Peter, when he did not frown and clench his hands and twist his lips. Suddenly I saw his beauty, saw the deep-set eyes and the fine line of the jaw, the full, sensual mouth, the lean, sturdy limbs. "But what of your wife when you see her again?" I muttered, unable to restrain my curiosity, even though Martha pulled at my sleeve to bid me to be quiet. That is what I meant. We shall live as brother and sister, he returned. I am convinced that it is God's will. He looked at me, full in the face. It will be hard, he said, very hard. He got up hastily, perhaps regretting that he had said so much, and wrapped his cloak around himself and walked over to where Jesus sat with John. I watched the tenderness in the set of his back as he bent down to speak to them, the longing. You should indeed take care of yourself, young women, a different voice said behind us. Too many apricots are bad for the bowels, and we can't have you falling ill. I've too much on my hands as it is. We spun around. A tall woman stood behind us, laughing at us, her shrewd eyes twinkling and her hand pointing to the heap of apricot kernels at our feet. Her form was massive, her breasts and hips bulging under her pleated robe as though she were in the prime of her life, and yet her matted hair was grey and her face ancient and crisscrossed with wrinkles. You don't remember me, she berated us, slapping her sides at our discomfort. But I know both of you very well, and I knew your mother too, as well as I know the mother of the Lord and the Lord himself. Enough trouble you caused me both of you, coming so late and so arduously. Her great breast shook with laughter. Did your mother never talk of me, Salome the midwife? She sat down next to us, crossing her legs with an agility unexpected in one of her bulk, and spread the honey-coloured folds of her clothing around her until they were arranged to her satisfaction. Hey-ho, it's the odd ones become disciples, but never neglect your health, say I. And here I am, 60 years old to prove it. 6 children, 5 abortions, 3 miscarriages, and no teeth. The laughter rumbled again in her chest. She reached a fat finger and prodded Martha. There's plenty of work for me here, I'll be bound. None of these babies knows the first thing about how to prevent conception. What about you? Will you be needing the help of old Salome? Young Maisie husks, lemon skins, sponges, and vinegar. I've got them all here in my little bag. You want me to show you? Martha's face was red as the firelight, and mine too, I dare say. I'd never discussed with my sister the precautions I use, the hints I had picked up during my training in the house of Alexandria. I looked back at Salome, feeling myself beginning to resent her, and she cocked her head up on one side, her little eyes malicious and bright. Don't forget about the apricots now. I'll sing to you. She rummaged in the lather bag slung onto her girdle and produced some kind of sturdy pipe or flute that looked as though it had been roughly carved from the stem of a plant. She blew 3 shrill notes on it so that everyone heard and hushed their chatter and turned to listen to her. She threw the flute towards John and he caught it deftly. You play for me, boy, while I sing. She jiggled her shoulders and then was still. Her voice was tuneful and harsh, licking at our ears like the night's wind. Now Salome heaved herself up and took my hand and pulled me up to her. Despite her age, she had immense strength, so that I had no choice but to rise. There are many things you think you know, young woman, she cackled to me. Are there not? I tell you, there are some other things you should know, and that you resist knowing. Where are your wits, girl? Lose them in order to find them. She began to dance, still holding my hand, so that I was forced to dance with her. I did not break free, for I supposed I owed her reverence as a woman ancient enough to be my grandmother, and I resented her with a great force, and closed my heart to her. And all the while she went on singing her foolish song. Rock-a-bye baby on the treetop, when the wind blows the cradle will rock, when the bough breaks the cradle will fall. Anyway, I'm not singing it all because I don't want to. There. And then she was dancing again, holding me fast by the hands and urging me to follow her steps. Though by now I was exhausted and wished only to sink down and sleep, anger blew out of me like the wind. Stop it, old mother. I'm tired and I don't want to dance anymore. She released my hand. The smoke from the fire billowed out a great gust as the wind got up. And when it cleared away, Salome had disappeared. Where she had stood, there was only the figure of John, smiling at me and holding the reed pipe in his hand. I caught his arm. How do you know that music? Where did you learn it? He looked surprised at me, at my intensity. Salome taught it to me, he answered. She likes to dance, and we often dance with her. I see that you know the steps. The last time I had seen that dance performed was in Alexandria at the Aphrodisia, the feast of Dionysus, into which I had smuggled myself in disguise in the company of Sibylla's slave. I shuddered, remembering the red wine spilt and smeared on women's mouths like blood, the wild frenzy of the dancing of matrons and girls, and the ecstatic angry stamping of feet, and the piercing ululations to the sound of drums and cymbals, as the women called upon the young male god they had lost and feared dead and wished to revive. There was a white bull brought for the sacrifice, decked with garlands of flowers. As I watched, the women tore him apart with their teeth. No, I said to John, I don't know the steps. But where is Salome? She is asleep, he said, astonished. Over there, look. He pointed to the outline of a vast body huddled under a rock. Then he touched my arm. Don't be afraid, Mary. She means no harm. You should sleep too. Good night. I curled up in my cloak next to Martha by the dying embers of the fire. I believe I slept only fitfully, for I could not get the music of the dance and the silly song out of my mind. Then at dawn we were up and on the road again. After that first evening I remained cautious whenever I saw Salome. She appeared and disappeared all along the route, often staying behind in villages to help women who had need of her, and then rejoining us. She saw that I wished to hold her at a distance, but merely laughed at me, coming up to talk to me whether I willed it or not. Also, I tried to hide my love for Jesus, for I feared the others' name-calling or their jealousy. Then gradually, as the days passed, I saw how my anxiety was founded, and rooted in the old ways I had lived, and I began to make friends. Indeed, Martha and I needed help, being quite ignorant as to how to manage this life on the road. The others answered all our questions with patience and sometimes with amusement, and talked to us openly of their love for Jesus and for each other. Love was not a word I had had much occasion to use before, and it pleased me deeply to make inquiries of our companions as to its meaning for them. My understanding grew only slowly. I pieced knowledge together bit by bit Often the pieces did not fit or contradicted one another. I did not mind. I was content to be accepted and to be making friends. We were a strong, close company, united in our yearning dissatisfaction with this world, which had dealt harshly and unjustly with many of us, and in which many of us felt we did not truly belong. This caused anguish to some and rejoicing to others. We spoke of an eternal home, though for a long time the meaning of this remained a great mystery to me, and our desire to reach this place united as an affection for one another, a feeling strengthened by our willingness to follow Jesus and to learn from him. We took care of one another, sharing what few possessions we had, setting a pace that all could follow, making sure that the food and water friendly people in the villages passed through gave to us was fairly distributed to everyone. When disagreements arose between us, as they often did, we were able to deal with them by drawing on the strength of our common purpose and what that gave us. I can't express how happy I was. For the first time in my life, I felt free. I was travelling in the company of friends I loved, never knowing in the morning where I would sleep that night or from where my next meal would come. Tramping the dusty road with my head bare and clothing loose, my skirts kilted up to my belt, my step easy, my muscles slowly strengthening and my skin browning with the fierce sun. Walking, I learned, is a kind of prayer, the body swinging along as a steady rhythm as the legs and feet dance ever onwards, and the soul is released by the regular motion into the infinite towards God. I began to acquire peace in my heart, and it is a healing thing, I discovered. To walk for hours every day until your bones ache and you are exhausted. Old problems and anxieties drop away. The normal sense of time shifts. Life acquires a simplicity which is profound and wide and lets the spirit grow wings. Often I was cold and hungry. Often my feet were sore and blistered. I was bitten by insects, slept on mouldy straw, and was sometimes so homesick that I had to clench my teeth together to keep from crying. I found that I even missed Lazarus, and yet looking speechlessly for hours every day at the red dust scuffed up by my sandals, or at the trees that we passed, soft and plumy with light, or at the burning blue of the sky, I began to believe that I travelled towards God and that I had a soul again. One especially hot morning, we all paused in a hollow on the side of a steep hill, enjoying the coolness of the spray of the stream tumbling down between the huge rocks in whose shade we lay. Jesus, who had been walking and talking with John, came to lie at my side and kissed me, full on the mouth. I knew that embraces exchanged in public by Jesus and me often offended Simon Peter, and so sometimes I pushed Jesus away or cautioned him against showing me so much affection. Sometimes, I must confess, I gloried in the preferences Jesus showed me, as on this occasion, when I knew my face showed my own desire, my pleasure and triumph. "Why do you love her more than any of us?" Simon Peter burst out, his face red with anger. "You know what she's been. It's not right." Jesus sat up and looked at him. "Why not ask why I don't love you in the same way as I love her?" he replied. Simon looked sulkily Men can't show love in that way, he muttered. It's an abomination and unclean. Mary loves me completely, Jesus answered him. Right, I've read that wrong. Right. Why do you love her more than any of us? Simon Peter burst out, his face red with anger. You know what she's been. It's not right. Jesus sat up and looked at him. Why not? Ask. Why I don't love you in the same way as I love her, he replied. Simon looked sulkily. Men can't show love in that way, he muttered. And it's abomination. It's an abomination and unclean. Mary loves me completely, Jesus answered him. Body and soul. Our kisses demonstrate that we are lovers of each other and lovers of God, nourishing each other, conceiving and giving birth between us to God. He laid a hand on his friend's arm. Simon, Simon, he teased him. You must learn to kiss more. And become more like her? Simon Peter cried. Never. His words hurt me, though I was determined they should not. I jumped and Jesus felt my movement and held on to my hand, which I tried to draw out of his. Simon Peter and I sat there on either side of him, linked to him, and so forced into contact with each other. Jesus began to instruct us, and so we listened, a little unwillingly. It's not possible, he started, for anyone to see those things that actually exist unless they become like them. Most people in the world don't behave like that. They see the sun without becoming the sun, or they see a tree without becoming olive wood. But you, my disciples, are different. You can see the Spirit and become Spirit. You can see me, the Christ, and become Christ. You can see God and become God. You can see light and become light. And so, Simon, you can see Mary filled with God and become Mary. Simon pulled away, obviously offended. Tell Mary to leave us, he cried, for women are not worthy of life. All the women in our group sat bolt upright and stared at him. Nobody spoke. It was out now, what many of us had secretly feared and waited for, that old denunciation we had lived with all our lives so far, and which had constrained us so bitterly until we had met Jesus. You are unclean. You may not be priests. I fought a desire to bow my head, to shrink into myself, to cry, and I took my hand out of that of Jesus and wrapped my arms around my knees and stared straight ahead. There is a hurt which women carry inside them from birth, and which I had surrounded with my songs and prayers, just as an oyster surrounds the painful grit forced between its lips with layers of mother of pearl. Each of the women in our company had created and so carried a pearl inside herself, and knew that the others did so too. Sometimes, talking of it when we were alone together, Jesus alone, it seemed, of the men who travelled with us, had understood the songs I made it, praising the pearls that women carry. The strong links that we had forged between each other, the necklace of pearls we strung as we moved along the roads of Samaria and Galilee. There was a merchant, I had sung, who was offered a pearl of great price. Now Simon Peter was breaking the thread of the necklace, grinding the fragile gleaming pearls into the dust at his feet. We remained silent and stared at Jesus. I myself, Jesus said, shall lead Mary in order to make her male, for that she may become a living spirit resembling you males. For every woman you will make herself male shall enter the kingdom of heaven. and I shall lead you. Peter, in order to make you female, so that you may become a living spirit resembling these women. For every man who will make himself female will enter the kingdom of heaven. Balancing male and feminine energy, masculine and feminine energy. This is what we need to do. I could contain myself no longer. Something had breathed and moved in me as I listened to these words. Someone whose name I did not know had whispered at my ear, had sent power tickling along my veins. I trusted it. I had no choice. I leapt to my feet and began to prophesy. I've got something touching me all over my face. I will show you the power of the woman, I cried, both to create and destroy. Through the gateway of the woman we come into life. From the mother we come, struggling and bawling into the light, and to her we return, choking and crying, as helpless as infants, our breath rattling as we are sucked back into death, her darkness. Our life in this world is framed by the woman, by the mother, who surrounds us with her power. If we do not respect her image in her creation, she will act swiftly to protect herself. If men do not revere the power of the female in their works and in their acts and in their speech, if they forget from whom they came and to whom they will return, then she will exact her revenge, her vengeance. She will descend and slaughter all her children. She will erupt, causing famines, plagues and droughts, and terrible wars in which all her creation will be destroyed. And we shall die too, her withered unloving progeny, and shall be taken aback into her to be renourished by her blood, to grow once more inside her womb, and to be fed on her wisdom until we are ready to be reborn again. I say unto you that there shall be a time in which all of this shall come to pass. And do women now stand up and speak? Simon Peter jeered at me. Shall a woman raise her voice in public and instruct men? I stayed on my feet, though I trembled. The power had gone out of me, and I felt like a silly woman who had drunk so much wine at a wedding and disgraced herself. I knew that I was ignorant of divine truth, that Jesus possessed a wisdom beyond mine. I did not know what to do or what to say. I felt my mouth hang open and slack at my hands shake. Simon Peter saw this and took advantage. He turned to Jesus, who sat still and quiet on the ground next to him. My knees turned weak under me, and I sat down too, a little apart from them, on a rock which felt solid and comforting. You said to us once, Lord, Simon Peter pressed on, that we should pray in the place where there is no woman, and that is what we have always done. You told us that you have come to destroy the works of women, of femaleness. So how can you let this woman preach like this in front of us, in front of all of us? See, Simon Peter was getting the wrong message. He wasn't listening properly to what Jesus was saying. So he was still ignorant, you know? And he couldn't get it. He couldn't get it. I sat huddled on my rock. The mother of the Lord stirred from her place among Martha and the others and got up and came to sit next to me. All my old pride had come back, the armour behind which I hid, and from behind which I flung darts at those whom I considered my enemies. She vanquished me, settling herself beside me and taking my hand. The mother of Jesus was a little woman, slender and wiry, with black hair turning silver in front and big black eyes. And she was powerful. She gripped my fingers, and I felt her force flow into me and replenish me. Jesus sighed and looked at Simon Peter. I am willing to accept the witness of women, he said, and so should you be. I am willing to learn from a woman's visions of the truth. What I meant by those words you have repeated was this: when you make the two one, and when you make the inside like the outside and the above like the below, when you remove the barriers, Simon, when you make the male and the female one in unity, so that the male is no longer male and the female no longer female, then you will enter the kingdom. This is what I meant by destroying the works of femaleness. I have come to destroy the works of maleness too. He pointed at me. So, Simon, be like Mary, for she is trying to join the male to the female inside herself, and to break down the boundaries between what is above and what is below, and what is inside and what is outside, and to become whole. How could she do this if she did not first know what is female and what is below and what is inside? You must do the same for yourself. First you must know what is male and what is above and what is outside, and then you must learn from the woman how to join her and become whole, as Mary is learning from me and I from her. All of you must learn this, and the way to this knowledge is through love. Love is knowledge, is this knowledge. This knowledge is love. Simon Peter sprang up and strode to the fro between the rocks, halting at the brink of the stream and then turning and coming back to face us. His whole body showed his distress, and I began to see how hard it was for him to give up his ideas that had supported him his whole life. And it struck me then how alike he and I were, with our violent tempers, and I winced. This is why I realized we clashed so often. I was no better a lover of God than he. At least he spoke out what he felt. I began to listen to him with a new respect as I saw him beat his hands together, fist to palm. When we were simply Hebrews, Lord, he shouted, we were orphans and denied the pagan knowledge of the mother of which Mary speaks. But when we became disciples and left everything to follow you, we learned about the Father and discovered a new country and a new home. Our laws tell us that women must learn from men and may not preach in public, as Mary and her sisters do. Don't you know that women are the gateway to evil and to death? It's written in the sacred text. The creation of men followed that of the earth, and the woman followed the man. The marriage followed the woman, the reproduction followed the marriage, the death followed reproduction. Therefore, we should shun all intercourse with women and become virgin again, so that we may not be resurrected and conquer death and have eternal life. Don't you see? It's logical. I was not speaking simply of fleshly love, Jesus said. You misunderstand me. There are those like yourself who become virgin again through abstaining from carnal pleasure. But you must still let the marriage happen in your soul. There are men and women in our company who love only the members of their own sex. They must still let the marriage happen in their souls. There are those like Mary and me who marry each other in the body and then find the marriage happening in our souls. What matters is that marriage is in the soul. And all of us are beginning to become virgin again. For all of us are becoming whole. He pointed at me again. When you were Hebrew, he said to Simon Peter, and did not truly know the Father, my Father, who lives in heaven and desires to live in you, then you forbade women to enter the sanctuary of the temple, the courts of the Most High. You thought to resist, by doing this, the power of the mother alone that some of the pagans celebrate. But as Mary has reminded us, you have driven out the mother completely by cleaving to the Father alone. And so you have made God, who is in heaven, grieve. Now that you are disciples, I say to you that you should rather accept and welcome women to minister in public and spread the knowledge of my word, so that the father and mother may be joined anew in each one of you, and your new life may begin. The religions of the mother are evil and bloodthirsty, Lord, Simon whispered. You can't know. Jesus looked at his mother and me. Evil is not femaleness, he said gently. How could it be? Evil is indeed powerful, but it is a gesture of loneliness and desolation. It is hatred, which means a place of exile, of coldness and stiffness. It is the absence of the fullness of God in you. It is the forgetting of the male joined to the female within yourselves. You must remember that you can know God only when you know both parts of yourself and let them come together. The light of the Father married to the darkness of the mother. Mary has reminded us of this, and I bless her for that. I felt again the pressure of his hand, of the hand of the mother of Jesus on mine. This wordless communication brought us both to our feet, looking at each other and smiling. Then, still grasping one another's hands, we turned to the other and sang to them, to the others, and sang to them for the first time, singing a song together. I am the virgin, I sang, I am the mother, I am the midwife, she sang, and she who is sterile. I am the honoured one, I sang, and she who is scorned. I am she whose wedding is great, she sang, and I have not taken a husband. I am the bride, I sang, and I am the bridegroom. I am shameless, she sang, and I am ashamed. I am an alien, I sang, and I am a citizen. Hear of me in gentleness, she sang, and learn of me in roughness. I am, I sang, the knowledge of my name. I am the first, we sang together. I am the last. Men will go up to their resting place, and they will find me there, and they will live, and they will not die again. We all spent the rest of the day quietly, shaken by what had happened, by the power and the divisions that could erupt between us. We needed time to recover, time to reflect on what Jesus had said. I did not find his teachings easy to understand, and nor I think did the others, even though they had been travelling with him longer than I. Not with the intellect could the sayings of Jesus be taken in. Rather, they entered in through the ears and mouth and nose of the Spirit. I began to realize that I had had no inkling when I became a disciple of what I had taken on. God will have you, Mary Magdalene, a small voice whispered inside me. By the scruff of your neck I shivered. Did I really want God? I was sure the others did. They seemed to have embraced our new life. as Jesus had commanded, with no shrinking, no turning back. We don't choose God, he told us. God chooses us. Now I believed him. Now I felt naked and small before God. I was sitting beside the mother of the Lord. The others sitting and lying about the hillside, watching the sun go down. Jesus snatching a short sleep. The boy John sitting like a guard a little way off, as though to protect him. How do I know, I whispered to the Saviour's mother, whether the voices that speak in me and make me sing come from God? Did I blaspheme when I invoke the power of the mother? She shifted and looked at me. Trust the voice, daughter, she said, as we trust you. I lowered my head, needing to confess. I stumbled over my words. I'm arrogant, I said. All my life, I've trusted only myself, only my own experience. I have learned little or nothing from our priests. I have not allowed men to give to me, believing them dangerous in their power. Yet I'm willing to learn from your son. She nodded, and I felt bold enough to go on. Your son is the first man I have allowed to touch my spirit. Surely that is because God is so powerfully present in him. I think that what has happened to me is true for all of us. Yet I know that when he touches my body, and that feels holy too. And this confuses me. Are we doing wrong? Should we stop? Some of the others here speak of fleshly love as one of the ways towards the knowledge of God. But Simon Peter sees it as an abomination because we practice our love outside marriage. I have performed the act of love with many men and felt nothing. Yet with your son, it is entirely different because our spirits also mingle, and I feel something that I've never felt before, a gladness, a merriment that makes me laugh and feel easy and light. Speaking of these matters to the mother of the Lord made me ashamed, and so I fell silent, fearing to offend her, not daring to look at her. God comes to each of us in different ways, she said. To some, God comes through the leaves on a tree, turning over in the wind, and to others through the experience of hardship and poverty. If for you God comes through the wholeness of love that you share with a man, who are you to deny it? I know this much, that the world is beginning all over again, with a great tearing apart and a great putting together, and that God is suddenly speaking to all of our company, men and women alike, and that matters. All that matters is that we listen. She paused and smiled at me. I was younger than you, she said, when I found this out. She told me her story then, how she was betrothed to Joseph, but not yet married, a virgin according to our Hebrew ways of naming, and she was discovered to be pregnant, and how all the people of her village whispered against her and vilified her. They told Joseph, she said, smiling again, that I was a loose woman who had slept with another man, and that either from justice he should cast me off, from pity he should immediately marry me to legalize my shame. I didn't understand her and opened my mouth to ask a question, but she took no notice of my fidgeting at her side and continued serenely. I had a dream, she said, in which God spoke to me and told me not to be fearful, not to collapse with shame or guilt, not to hide myself. God came to me as a shaft of light in a doorway, and then as a child kicking. So I trusted God and told Joseph to do so too. So we were married, and then Jesus was born. She took my hand in hers and gripped it until my fingers hurt from the pressure. So trust your voices, daughter. Believe that they come from God and do not fear them. That night I lay with Jesus, held in his arms, in a grain store belonging to a kindly farmer whose property lay along the route, separated from the others only by the wall of the cloak he cast about us. We touched each other in the darkness. As we drew closer and closer towards each other, we entered a new place, a country of heat and sweetness and light, different to the ground we had explored together before. I felt as taken upwards and transformed. I no longer knew what was inside and what was outside, where he ended and I began. Only that our bones and flesh and soul were suddenly woven up together in a great melting and pouring. I was 6 years old again, lying on the roof, looking up at the stars, at the rents in the dark fabric of the sky and the light shining through it. Only this time I rose, I pierced through the barrier of shadows, and was no longer an I, but part of a great whirl of light that throbbed and rang with music for a moment, till I was pulled back by the sound of my own voice whispering words I did not understand. This is the resurrection and the life. There. That's the end of chapter 3. Next time I'll read chapter 4. I think it's better if I read it like this, and then you have time to digest it and think about it. And there's messages in that one. Hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. See you next time. Bye bye.